Hello folks and welcome. So this is part 2 of a video that I did the other day regarding using SSH Server on your home network or local network. Today I'm going to talk about public key, but I'm also going to talk about the general setup, which is, if you want to call it, a non-public key. And we're going to be talking about setting up an SSH server on your local network. And also we can talk about firewalls if you want to put those on there. A lot of your home routers have built-in firewalls, but we can also put in firewalls if we have anything with the word server in it. So I have several examples for you. I have more computers than this, believe it or not, on this network currently, but I'm going to be transferring files from this laptop over to this SSH server. Now, this is going to be first using public key, but I will talk about just the general setup also toward the latter part. That's actually a basic setup, and you really don't have to adjust too many things. But I'm also going to talk about generating those private and public keys on these systems. Generally, you set up a private key on the current computer you're at, and then send the public key over to the server. So I have another SSH server online, it's not listed in here, that I will also show you the demo how to log into those using this file manager that I'm using today. So, long intro, yes, XFCE is what I'm using. XFCE desktops are lean and mean, and it doesn't matter if they're Linux Mint or others. It's generally just something that I prefer to use to put SSH on there, because all I'm doing is either sharing files using Samba or using SSH to store backups from any one of these computers in here, as an example. But we're going to talk about what all these buzzwords mean. Hopefully you know what Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol does. It assigns Internet Protocol addresses to computers that are not static IP addresses. Generally, when I install these servers, I make that a static Internet Protocol address, versus these are what your router dishes to these things when you turn them on and off. So I'm going to first give you the demo, and this is a laptop using Linux. I believe it was, it's Cinnamon, and I'm going to transfer some files into that system using public key. And then we'll talk about the whole setup and also why you would get errors. I covered most of that in my previous video, so this is part 2. In here, Sam is our made-up name user for today, and Sam has a My Junk folder, which is currently empty, and My Junk 2, which is currently empty. All right. If you just hang on a second, what I'm going to do is grab a hold of my laptop, and I am going to paste a couple of images on this system here, if I can get this touchpad to react properly. I generally don't like touchpads, by the way. I probably have made mention of that 100 times on different videos. But in either case, you just saw me transfer 6 JPEGs in here. This could have been anything. We can also take and transfer backups. Let's take a tar, for instance, from a computer over to the SSH server if we create a folder for each one of these systems. So that's one benefit of doing that. But if you're learning how to do SSH server, and a lot of people are, I'm going to talk about the procedure, especially using public key, because I'm also going to talk about generating those keys and what these things mean. And generally, you can find this information on ssh.com also. So we have our router that we can talk wirelessly, or we can use Ethernet, or both. I just represented the laptop in both capacities because the laptop also can have an Ethernet wire on it. All right, and this is a tower computer. Basically, it's a very small one, to be exact. And I have a second SSH server running on my local network that also use Samba shares that I actually back up my iPhone photos to. So yes, it does have some usefulness. Let's talk a little bit about setups. Now, if you want to do this in order, I highly recommend that you subscribe, because we're going to talk about this in order. So a lot of times people skip over stuff and they end up with stuff like this, permission denied public key, and they can't figure out why. Because the first thing we're going to talk about is using public keys. These are encryption keys. And yes, you can set that up on your local network also to have a little fun. And again, later on, I'll talk about the optional firewall if you want to entertain that. So the first thing that I recommend that you go and install SSH Server software. Now this is a Linux Mint XFCE, but generally SSH is available for a lot of Linux distributions, if not all. Generally also you will find on a lot of Linux desktops you'll have the client installed, and that's the case with all the Linux Mint products. The client is already installed. You may not be using it, but it is installed nonetheless. I installed the server side. Well, a lot of things change when that happens. Let me grab a hold of one of my SharePoints here. I think I have a screenshot here of what it looks like without, on the remote USB. I think it's without, there it is. So this is generally when you have client installed on the Linux Mint XFCE desktop. With client SSH only, you'll have two files in the etc. SSH folder. We're going to talk about that one. But when you install server, you'll have an SSHD config and an SSHD _ config D. You'll have two of these. One with that name and the other one with the D on the end. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. Now, before we do any configurations, we installed server. That's assuming that you've already done that. Okay, so filming in 1080 if I didn't say so earlier. Well over 500 videos. My first video you can find also if you haven't seen that one. Now, after you install the SSH Open Server, or Open SSH Server, I should say, I want you to create a hidden file in here, or at least look for it. So it's Control H is what I'm going to use on my keyboard. If not, go to the menu and activate your hidden files. All right, so look for that folder there, .ssh. Generally, you may have to create it. It's not a big deal. Right-click, create a folder. Just begin with a period, and you make sure that it's spelled the same way, .ssh. So you won't have any files in here. So what you can do if you want to use keys, you can generate this file yourself. It's a text file. Right-click, create an empty file, and call it authorized _ keys. I'm making this bigger for you for a reason. And the reason I recommend that you use this name instead of just making up one yourself is because when I talk about activating keys in your configuration file, it's easier that way. Otherwise, you have to make some additional edits in the configuration file. Authorized _ keys, not space keys. That's one of the mistakes people make. And then they do everything right and they still end up with this mess right here. Permission denied public key, and they can't figure out what's going on. So if you do this in this order, I think you'll have less troubles. Now, when you get done generating the blank file and you've already created the folder, you need to change permissions. In here, I will open up this one. I think I might have it in my history buffer. I do. I have actually several entries because I was doing the other video the other day. So 52 and 53, or I could use 42 or 43, which is chmod space 700. The tilde represents your home folder and then .ssh. That's why I had you create those first. What you're doing is you're changing the permissions of the folder, and you're not going to allow anybody in there. That's the whole key of this. And then you're going to change the permissions on that authorized _ keys file to a 600 to make sure that these things work properly. So I'm going to perform a 42, which is usually done with the exclamation point 42, because my commands should have worked already. And you can see that it's chmod 700 tilde /.ssh. I'm just verifying the permissions. Then I'm going to perform the next one, which is a chmod 600, and that would be line 43. So 43 it is. I don't want to have to type that because they're already there. All right, so with that said, we're going to visually check this. Right-click, Properties, Permissions. No others have access. That's what you want. Sam is our made-up name user. He has read-write access. That's what you want. Your local user, whoever that is. The same thing with the authorized keys files, which is currently empty, theoretically, right? We have access, no others. That's what you want for security. Now we're going to be using keys, and I'll talk about generating keys in this video too. But to have keys, we need the authorized keys file with the correct permissions before we play. And then you're going to open up your file system and look for the etc. directory or folder and the SSH folder because you installed Open SSH Server. With the client, you'll still find this, and you'll find two files if you have client only. When you install server, you have extra files. That one is one of them. There's an SSH_config and an SSHD_config. This is the file that controls the configuration. If you decide you don't want to use security keys, private and public, on these computers, then you can leave the configuration file standard. In other words, don't make any changes. And in here, when you connect to the other machines, they'll start collecting the information about the system that connected in this known host file. But we're going to be using this file for keys in this video first, so we can get that out of the way. And we need to generate these public and private keys on these computers independently. I am filming from this machine today, so what I'm going to be doing is making it very clear to you that when I generate these keys, I'm pretending to be here. And then we're going to transfer the public key here. But we're going to talk about the configuration file first. And that is located in File, System, etc., folder or directory, SSH. You just type for it. You'll find it. My recommendation to you is you copy this thing before you edit it. Copy it. It is currently has everything in this folder has the permissions of root. Okay, so we're going to need to edit that in root mode a little bit later, but let me just show you that I have a copy of it sitting here. And then what I did was I opened this in a word processor, which is a no-no when you're doing editing. But the reason I opened this in LibreOffice is I highlighted the lines that you need to edit for bare minimum to get this working with security keys. So this is generally what the file looks like. All right, I have also another text editor called Kate. I like to use this one when I film because it has a highlighter in it. So what I'm going to do is make that larger for you. So this is a general SSHD_config. That's the server file. And generally, if we don't know what those symbols mean, they're usually used for two purposes in programming. One is to describe a thing, and one is to, if it's configuration files, is to activate and deactivate things. Hopefully that's clear. You'll see a lot of these in here. So to activate something, we remove the symbol in front of it. So if I were to permit root login prohibit password, I would remove that symbol, and now it's active if I save it. Does that make sense? Now it's not. All right, so what I did for you, I'm going to do a discard, is I opened this same file up in a word processor, which is generally a no-no, but the only reason I'm doing this is to highlight the lines you need to edit. All right, forget about the spelling errors. The ones that are lit up in yellow are the ones that you're going to be editing if you want to use public keys. All right, so the permit login prohibit -password, I normally just change that to a no. That's good enough, and I deactivate the front symbol, which makes that active. With public or pub key authentication, yes, all I do is remove the symbol, and that's it. And then the very important one is the authorized key file. You remove the symbol in front of it, and generally it will take on .ssh authorized _ keys. That's why I had you name that file the way it's named, so you don't have to edit this line. And then there's one more that will have the symbol removed, but I changed that to password authentication no, because we want to do this without passwords. So what is the difference on the two? All right, so if you kept the standard setting on your SSH server, which is no edits on the configuration file, these machines will connect, and this machine will give it a key. And then from now on, after you accept the key on this machine or that machine, you will be using passwords only. That's generally acceptable. So you're going to be logging into the user on that system and with a password. But let's say you want to write script files that have automated type of backups, like rsync, for instance. You don't want to write into your script, would you pause for a second for the user to put in their password? No. That's why you want public key authentication, because you're not putting in passwords. It already has the public key. You got the private key. We're now talking, and we can use script files for that also, if we want to, or we can just drag and drop. All right, with that said, we're going to open up the actual configuration file in root mode, which is again, etc. and SSH. Just type in a bunch of S's and you'll find it. I just typed in 2 S's. So you want to edit this one, not this one. All right, so first of all, to edit anything in this folder requires root permission, so you'll need to open the thing in root mode. All right, and if you are the type of person still learning about Linux and what root permissions are, be careful in here. Again, make a copy of that file before you do anything. All right, I'm just using a sample or a basic system setup today. I would use a decent password if you're going to do this kind of stuff. But this is a demo machine. So we are going to be editing that, not this. So this is the main server SSH configuration file. Generally, if you don't edit this at all, it'll still work just fine. You will be accepting the key that the server is going to dish you. You'll type in the word yes, and then from now on, you'll just be using passwords. And you could be good with that. But if you're trying to write script files to do automated rsyncs, you may want to try the public key route. We are now in elevated privilege mode. Now I'm going to show you mine. Now port 22 is usually default for SSH. I don't really need to change that on a home network. Now if you're talking internet server, sometimes people remove that and change that to a different port number for security reasons. But for home network, again, we're doing this in a home network environment where we're either learning about SSH or we're going to actually use it for possibly file backup storage. Your choice. Either way, scroll down to where it says permit root login and remove this symbol right here in front of it. Shall I use Kate? Why not? I'll open this again, but using Kate. I'm still in elevated privilege mode. All right, so in either case, let's scroll down and we find these symbols, right? Well, again, anytime you see a line that doesn't have that symbol in front of it, the command is going to be processed, wherever you are at. So if I go all the way to the top of the file, line 12, if you want to call it that, yours could be different, the include blah, blah, blah is going to be processed. All right, port 22, by the way, is default, so you can leave that alone. Now, the permit login no is what I like to actually activate, because I don't like to have root logins done. So, but that doesn't mean when you log into your user, you can't do root stuff. You can, but you have to be authorized first. And we're going to do that with public keys. So permit root login, no, is just a security thing. That's the first thing that I do. Over here, you'll see pub key authentication, yes, but it doesn't have that symbol in front of it. This is now off. This is now on when I save the file. So yes, we're doing pub key authentication, public keys, and we're going to be generating those in a second. The next line is very important. You need to remove the symbol in front of it because you need to tell the system where to go find that keys file. And that key files is generally found in your home folder .ssh authorized _ keys. That's the first file. You'll see another one behind it. It's currently not in use. This is in use though. So let's cover this again. Why did I have you create these ahead of time? Your SSH folder has an authorized keys file that matches that name. That's why. You could put the whole path, if you like, would be /home/ your username /.ssh / the name of this file. If you make a change and call it something different, you need to fix it in here. But to keep it simple, we use the same names to make it simple. All right, that's line 41. I removed the symbol in front of it. Again, I have a choice. I could also make the full path. Then I scroll down a little bit further, and this is easy to miss. This will say password authentication no. What happens when you leave it at yes? It'll ask for passwords on your keys. When I flip this to no, that means that we're going to be using nothing but keys and no password authentication. And that's generally all you need. And you save that file. When you save these files, I'm going to do a discard on mine because I didn't make any changes. But whenever you alter this file, you need to restart SSH. You don't have to log in or log out. I'm going to just show this to you. And what the command is in my history buffer. So you can see it on the screen. Line 55 is sudo space systemctl one word space restart space SSH. I'm going to perform a line 55 if you don't mind. I'll just do this without typing. So mine is going to be done this way. Sudo systemctl restart SSH. I still need Sam's password. So, because it's a sudo command, super user do. Now I just restarted the SSH server because we changed that file, or maybe I didn't change it, but you would have normally changed it. Let's put it that way. So now we have that ready to go, and we now have no keys in this file. I do, because I transferred files earlier, and I'll let you see a typical key that would be in here. So the more keys that you copy, I'm just going to use the first one here as the sample. And you can have different encryption keys. Now I'm going to just do a copy, and I usually, what I like to do is if I have one key in there, is one line, enter, another line, and then paste another key and another key. I know they're the same currently, but I'm going to show you how to generate these. But this, if this had different names on them and different computer names or whatever, this would be 3 keys. But this would be ED25519s, and they're plenty good for this process at home. But I'm going to show you what RSA looks like and some others. And they'll be quite lengthy. All right, so I'm going to leave that. So how did I get this key in here? I use a special method on my network. I have a machine that also runs another SSH server that also runs Samba shares. And what I do is I take the key and I transfer that directly into that machine, and then I have this machine pull the key and then plug it into the file itself. Yeah, it's done with a weird concept, I know. It's actually right here. I have this folder called Remote USB. It's just a trash folder. And what I do is the laptop keys are actually in here. That one is the same security key that I was using for that laptop when I transferred those files earlier. Okay, and you can see it. And you can see that it says Tom at Nimo 12 or whatever that name of that computer. I'm just doing this with fictitious names. But that's what Tom is on this machine. And he was transferring files here using public key. And that's his public key. So I literally pull it from this machine. And then I place it in this file right here. Oops. I place it inside this file. They're just text files. But I'm going to show you how to do this. So I'm going to take you on a little ride over to SSH.com, the SSH Academy to be exact, and explain what these things are. When you generate these, you should have SSH client already installed, but you can use SSH Keygen. Now, if you use it by itself, it'll generate that key right there. If you want to do this properly, you follow this procedure, which is SSH-Keygen -T ED25519. Now I'll explain what these are. The RSA key is quite lengthy, especially if you do that with like a 4096. How many bits? The DSA is an old government digital signature type of thing, and the ECDSA is the standard one. You can read the rest. But this one is plenty good for home use. But I will show you how to generate a 4096. Now, before I do this, I want you to be absolutely clear on this. Do I have my map up? No, I don't. I think I closed it by accident. All right. I am going to pretend that I'm sitting on this computer that only has SSH client installed. We are going to generate 2 pairs of keys on these machines through your terminal box on each of these computers. One is called a private key that will have no extension, and the other one is a public key, which will have the extension PUB. We are going to transfer that key over to the server when we get done. Whether you stick in a USB stick, put it there, walk that thing over to the machine and insert it yourself. You remember, I did it goofy. I stored it somewhere else and electronically had it pulled. But on your home network, if you're playing, you can just walk your key over with a USB stick and then place it inside the server. I'll show you how to do this, but we're going to pretend we're on this machine. Hopefully that's clear. I will open up terminal on this machine, pretending we're on the other one. I'll make that larger for you. These keys by default will end up in your SSH folder, .SSH folder. When I get done with this, this creates a public and private key. All right, so basically what I'm going to do here is go ahead and generate that in here using this particular RSA key. It'll be a long one, just to give you an example of it. So what I'm going to do is minimize this and go ahead and hit paste. I'm sorry, the neighbors are quite noisy right now, and I apologize. All right. When you hit enter, it'll be generating the public and private key, and the default path is your home folder, username, .ssh, and the name of the key. This is something you need to think about. Do you want to use a passphrase? If you do, think about it before you start using script files. Without a passphrase, it's a lot easier to deal with. With a passphrase, you're going to have to enter something in your script file to take care of that. But do it without it if you're going to be using script files in the future. So empty, and now it generates the key. Now I'm going to close terminal and give you the examples of the 2 keys. This is your private key. This is the public key. So opening up the map, where does the private key stay? On the computer. So you generate them independently. You don't copy the private keys to these other machines. That is your key. The public key goes on the server. So when you connect to the server with all this stuff configured properly, your SSHD config is done properly, and you have the key already in that folder, then you can communicate. It's not going to happen until that you take that public key and you put it in the machine. And how do you do that? Well, what I'm going to do here is pretend that we're on the other computer. So I'm going to get rid of the private key and just deal with the public key. How did you get it to this machine? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to literally just put it in downloads. Okay, and you can see there's another public key in there. But this is an RSA key. That's the one I just generated. I'll let you see the difference. Whole bunch of numbers compared to the other one. The ED5 2519s are shorter keys, and that's plenty good for home. But in either case, I'll finish this up. So whether you want to open up two windows or not, that's all up to you. I'm going to do this just for the purposes on the screen. I will resize this, move this over to here, Control N is in Nancy, and we're going to open up that RSA key that I just generated. And again, we're pretending we're on this system here. So I put it on a USB stick, and let's say I walked it over to here. And I threw it onto this machine and put it in the download folder. Now I'm going to open it up physically. We can see that number in there, and then on the other box we're going to open here with the SSH and the authorized keys file. Remember, I have ownership of this. Now you notice this text editor just made 2 tabs. Well, that's because I'm using the standard text editor that comes with Mint in this case, Xed, and that's plenty good for this. The RS key is a lot larger than the current key that I have. So what I'm going to do is click in here for a second and hit enter twice so it gives me a space, and then copy the whole key. You make sure you copy everything. That would be Control A, selects all. I highly recommend that you do this. If you try to click and drag, you may miss a digit. So Control A is a good way. You can also use Control C to copy, or just right click on the thing. And then again, now my cursor is blinking on line 3, if you want to call it that. And that's the difference between the two. They're huge compared to that small one, that 25519. This is an RSA key. It's very long. You can actually discern that it has a username in here on both keys. All right, with that said, I'm going to get rid of that one and create another key. Okay, so we are going to close without saving because I never saved anything in here. And let me get rid of whatever is in here because we're going to generate a new pair. New pair of keys, and they're going to end up in here on the local machine. One more time. We are pretending to be here or here. It doesn't matter which machine. These machines are all running SSH client. Okay? So I'm not going to give you the examples of the rest of the keys, but I'm going to give you the example of the simplest one, which is this one right here, the ED25519. And this is generally plenty good for home use. Copy. Minimize. So we're generating the key. Let's pretend we're here. We're going to generate that key into the SSH folder, and then we're going to take the public key and walk it over to the system. All right, so we are doing this over here, and we're going to end up with the keys here. I'm going to get rid of that folder for a second. All right, I'm going to paste the command in there. So it's SSH-keygen-t space ED25519. Enter, 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 enter. The keys are in here. Private key, public key. It has the word pub on the bottom. This is the one that needs to be on the server. This one stays on the local machine. This needs to be on your local machine. If you delete it and you try to connect to the server, trying to match these keys, they won't communicate if you got key authentication on. Okay? So we're going to pretend again we're on the other system. We're done with this box and we want the public key on this system. All right. So I got this public key somehow into the system. I'm just going to leave it in this folder this time. So we're going to open up the public key. All right, you can see it in there. And then we're going to open up the authorized keys file. So you can see both of them in here. Okay, you can see the name of that machine, or the ending says Tom at something something. It's the name of the computer actually. That's this one right here. So this one here has the name of this user I just generated here on this local machine. But we're trying to pretend we're on the other system. Control A, Control C. Control C is a copy command. Again, I'm going to create a couple of lines and paste that new key in there. And both of them look the same, but they're not. They're both ED25519s, and they start with AAAs, and you can get to the end of the AAAs, and all of a sudden now you start seeing different symbols and numbers. Because these are unique keys for each system. Private key stays on the computers. Public keys get transferred over to the server. So the server can authenticate you. So you guys can have communications. And more importantly, if you generated the keys without a passphrase, it's a lot nicer to deal with if you're writing script files. They communicate better. Now you know how to generate some of these keys. Can I generate a different key pair by using just SSH keygen? You can. Let me first remove this so it doesn't confuse you. And I am just going to save this briefly. And we are going to generate another key pair just using that word SSH-keygen without any other symbols on it. All I'm doing is hitting enter. Now let's compare that key to the one that's already in here, because this is a different key theoretically. And we're going to be doing private key? No, public key. Public key goes into the authorized key file. Well, let's look at that. Is it the same as that last one? It is not. You can see that it says P7B1 something, even though the username is the same. See, that's different. But it's still a SSH ED25519. This is the proper procedure, by the way, is to use this format. But I just did it the other way, just by using this all by its lonesome. It auto-generated that one. I just did it for you. This is the one I just generated, which is not the same as this one. All right, in either case, I'm going to close. So public keys belong on the server. Private keys, this is what a private key looks like, by the way. It even says private key on it. Private keys stay where? One more time. Private keys stay on the machines, because you need to authenticate yourself. Let me give you an example of, I will be using this machine because I'm filming from it. There's another computer on my system, we'll just call it this one, that is running Open SSH Server also. And that one is also running an XFCE desktop. So let me get rid of these, because they're generally not here. And what is the reason for these two? That's if you're using the standard configuration without using keys. And your authorized keys files, it'll collect data on it. The first time you connect, what do I have open here? Let me see if I have a screenshot of this. The first time you connect, it might be one of these. You're going to see that ED255 key. It's going to connect on the first pass. You're going to SSH using the username and the computer name. And you can put the IP address, or you can put in .local if your machine does this kind of authentication. Linux Mint products do. On some systems, I have to use the IP address, even on a local network. In either case, it's going to ask you to type in the word yes on the first pass. Then afterwards, it's going to be using the security keys you guys negotiated. This is only on the first pass. However, if you are using regular configuration, you will see this first. You type in yes, not a Y, to accept the key. And then from then on, you'll be logging in this way. And if it's the standard configuration, it'll ask for passwords. If you're using keys, you will just hit enter on this case, and then you'll see something like this. I think it's this screenshot. you'll be automatically logged into the machine. You won't even see any passwords. You don't see anything in there that says password request. All right, so this is another machine. It's actually Debian, but we're going to connect to another one with MX on it. That's another, so map time. Anyways, we're going to pretend this is the MX99 machine, and that's also running SSH Server for this example. And we're going to use actually the file manager for this. All right, in Thunar, unlike the other file managers, like for the other Linux Mint products, sorry, I'm trying to turn off hidden. Like Nemo has a connector that says connect to computers. In Thunar, you're just going to use your address bar. So Control L. Now I'm going to use SSH. You can use SFTP if you like. All right, so the name of the computer is MX99, and if I hit enter, I get hostname not found. So what I need to do is Control L, SSH :2/ MX99.local, or the IP address. Now it's that machine is set up for password, so I'm just going to throw in the password. But since I didn't put a username, it's asking me for two things. So let me fix this a little bit better. Control L, SSH: 2/ username this time at MX99.local. That'll only ask for a password if I have the correct password to that. And I do. And it's a long one. Now this will remember the password until logout. If this was the first time I connected, it will ask you to accept the security key that that machine gave you on the initial pass. This is not this local machine. All right. I actually use this one to back up my iPhone photos and my wife's. They're right here. I was showing this the other day. She's a crack up on how much stuff she takes pictures of. 19 gigabytes worth of photos and videos. As opposed to mine, not so much. Mine is only 8. Now, I still got a lot of photos, but in either case, you know, grandkids, kids, friends, whatever. I can also create laptop and put backups, whether it's a plain or tar files. Guess where this came from? This system right here. This system is LM221. That folder says LM221. I transferred the backup there. Drag and drop, actually. Tar backup. That's what you can use some of this stuff for. You want to do this in terminal? Well, it's a lot easier, but we can run commands in terminal. The other day I was upgrading the drive on that system. So that requires a password. Again, this will just look like a blank to you. But I'm logged in on that system. It's just like me parking in front of it. So it's been running for 3 days. So I think that was the last time I took it down. And I can also run remote commands, like if I needed to know about the hard drive on it and what the storage space is left on it, I use a df command for that. This is not this local machine. So that one, I upgraded the drive to a 2 terabyte, and I'm currently 9% in use. I'm going to type in the word exit. Now I'm logged out, and you can see it changed to Sam. I'm going to do a df on this system. So that one is a smaller hard drive, as you can see. It's not the same as the other one. The other one's an NVMe, if you know what those are. This is a regular solid state drive. In either case, differences in systems. I can also issue a reboot command remotely if I wanted to. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about if you want to hang on is firewalls. Firewalls, I like to install them on anything that has the word server in it. The firewall for Linux Mint is GUFW or UFW. So on my home network, I have a firewall on my router. I also have a firewall on my ISP modem, which is fiber optic. But more importantly, if you want to add a firewall to your SSH server, you need port 22. Port 22 TCP. IP version 4, IP version 6. How do you do this? Have you ever seen my video on this firewall? Well, have you been on my channel to see any videos? If you're a subscriber, you can find this rather easily. I have well over 530 videos. Look in this little magnifying glass if you are wanting to find that video. I talk about 98% of this firewall settings in here. Don't forget, if you're a new subscriber, I recommend the posts and the about to view. So I'm going to remove the rules to show you how easy it is to add the SSH rules. Plus, you already allow outgoing, that's default. SSH, keep in mind we're doing this in a home network. Port 22 is plenty good for this. TCP/IP, version 4, version 6, port 22 TCP. That's all you need. Now you're ready to go. And I'll test it really quick if you like. I'll place some files in there from a laptop. Just give me a second. My laptop went into screensaver mode, so I need to get in there. What folder? Junk 1. Okay. Let me just change folders because I can do that remotely. This time we'll just do a couple of documents. Actually, and a folder. Control-C. And there you go. So I just transferred that. Then again, this could all be I could have been transferring a backup file from here to here too. Think about that for a second. I'm going to close all this stuff down and say thank you for watching.